A deep underground chamber can make a whisper feel like a thunderous revelation. This is the mystery of acoustic resonance in ancient temples, a forgotten technology carved into the earth itself. By the end of our journey, you will understand how these spaces were designed not just for sight, but as profound instruments for the mind. Why would cultures across the globe invest centuries to engineer caves that hum at specific frequencies, and what hidden states of awareness did those sounds unlock? The silent stones hold a sonic secret, waiting for us to listen. What does it mean to build a temple not for gods, but for the very vibration of a human voice? The science behind these whispering stones is both elegant and profound. To truly hear what the ancients built, we need to understand two simple ideas. The first is architectural acoustics. This is just a formal term for how sound moves, bounces, and lingers inside a room. Think of the difference between shouting in a padded closet and singing in a tiled bathroom. The shape and material of the space change everything. The second, more magical idea is resonance. Resonance occurs when a sound wave finds its perfect match. If you tap a tuning fork, it vibrates at a very specific pitch, its natural frequency. Bring a second, identical fork nearby and strike the first one, and the second will begin to hum in sympathy without being touched. That sympathetic vibration is resonance. In its most famous example, a powerful singer can shatter by precisely matching the glass's own natural vibrational frequency, causing it to shake itself apart. Now, scale that idea up dramatically. In an underground temple, the object is not a tiny glass, but an entire cavern hewn from solid limestone or granite. These dense stones have their own resonant frequencies. When a chant, a drum, or even a spoken word inside the chamber produces a sound wave that matches that frequency, something extraordinary happens. The entire space seems to awaken. The sound is not just louder, it is fuller, richer, and it lingers in the air, blending with itself. Acoustic researchers like Dr. Stephen Waller have studied this in ancient sites, noting how specific room shapes and materials can amplify certain tones, create standing waves where sound appears to hover in one spot, and even produce eerie effects where a note seems to shift in pitch as it echoes. This is not random acoustics. It is a signature. The very stone of the temple becomes an instrument, and the human voice its player. So the first great revelation is this: the builders were not just architects, they were audio engineers. They understood through trial and observation over generations how to tune a mountain. And that foundational knowledge forces a haunting question: if they went to such lengths to engineer these sonic properties, what were they trying to amplify? Not just sound, but something far more intangible. This leads us to a second, equally deliberate principle: the selection of the stone itself. The very rock from which these temples were hewn was not chosen by accident. Different stones have distinct densities and crystalline structures, and this geology creates a unique sonic signature for each site. Think of it as the difference between a drum made of oak and one made of cedar. The same strike produces a completely different tone. Ancient engineers understood this on an intuitive, practical level. They were not just looking for strong rock, they were listening for the right rock. Consider two powerful examples separated by geography but united by purpose. The Hypogeum on Malta is a labyrinth carved into soft Globigerina limestone. This stone has a porous, almost spongy quality. It absorbs some of the higher, sharper frequencies of sound, while allowing the lower, warmer tones to resonate and linger. The result is a muffled, intimate acoustic, a space where chants would blend into a rich, harmonic hum, wrapping around the listener. Now travel north to Ireland. This monumental passage tomb is built from and faced with hard, dense granite and quartz. These crystals are highly reflective. Sound hitting these walls does not get absorbed, it bounces back with clarity and brightness. A voice or a drum beat in would have been sharp, clear, and full of presence, creating a more vibrant and perhaps startling sonic experience. These are not random acoustic outcomes. They represent a material science achieved through what was likely centuries of observation and trial and error. Builders learned which quarries yielded stone that sang correctly, that held the desired note. This means an acoustic goal was prioritized alongside structural integrity. The mountain was not just a site, it was an instrument, and the first critical step in building that instrument was choosing the correct material. This deliberate choice challenges our perception of prehistoric technology, revealing a sophisticated understanding of the environment that went far beyond simple shelter. It sets the stage for the next logical question. Having chosen the perfect material, how did they then sculpt it? This brings us to the third principle, the intentional shaping of the space itself. Having chosen the right stone, the builders then sculpted it with a profound understanding of how form guides sound. One of their most powerful tools was the corbelled vault. This is a method of building a dome or arch ceiling without using true arches. Instead, each layer of stone is placed slightly inward over the layer below, like a staircase turned upside down, until the opening at the top is closed. The result is a smooth, curved ceiling, and acoustically, this shape is a masterpiece. A flat ceiling scatters sound waves in all directions, creating a jumble of echoes. But a smooth dome acts like a parabolic reflector, the same principle used in satellite dishes to focus radio waves. It collects the sound energy from within the chamber and concentrates it, often to a single, precise point. In magnificent structures like the Treasury of Atreus in Greece or the at Delphi, this acoustic focus is unmistakable. A person standing at that focal point, perhaps a priest or an oracle, could speak in a whisper and be heard with startling clarity by someone standing against the far wall. The architecture creates an auditory spotlight. This design was not merely for structural grandeur or aesthetic beauty, it was a tool for amplifying presence. It transformed a human voice into a resonant, omnipresent force, lending an otherworldly authority to the words spoken from that sacred spot. The very geometry of the room curated attention, ensuring that a message, a chant, or a prophecy would not just be heard, but felt by everyone present. This conscious manipulation of form reveals a level of sophistication that moves us from passive cave to active instrument. But the story of these sonic temples does not end with a single focal point. The most profound acoustic effects often emerged from the interplay of multiple shapes, leading to phenomena that must have seemed truly magical to those who experienced them. The most profound evidence of this sonic intent is not found in theory, but in the silent, subterranean dark of a room carved 5,000 years ago. The oracle chamber of the Hypogeum in Malta is a small, oval space, a pocket within a vast, multi-level complex hewn entirely from the living limestone. To stand within it is to feel an immediate, almost unsettling intimacy, but its true purpose is revealed not by sight but by sound. When a deep male voice chants at a specific, low frequency, around 110 Hz, something extraordinary happens. The entire chamber awakens. The air itself begins to vibrate with a palpable physical pressure. The sound does not just fill your ears, it resonates through the stone floor and into your bones. This is not a subtle echo, it is the entire room becoming a single, humming instrument. Acoustic researchers from the University of Malta have studied this phenomenon extensively. They found that this specific frequency, 110 Hz, is the natural resonant frequency of the chamber itself. When matched, it creates a powerful standing wave. But their investigations went beyond mere acoustics. Studies in acoustics suggest that exposure to sound waves at this specific low frequency can directly influence brain activity. It can quiet the language processing centers of the brain's left hemisphere while stimulating activity in the right hemisphere, which is associated with spatial awareness, intuition, and holistic thinking. In simpler terms, the very vibration of the room could gently guide a person into a trance-like, altered state of consciousness. Now, observe the chamber's design with this knowledge. A small, carved niche in the wall is not merely decorative. Its dimensions are perfect for amplifying and projecting that specific resonant frequency, acting as a natural sound box. The walls themselves are adorned with patterns painted in red, swirling motifs that might have held visual significance for someone in that heightened sonic and mental state. Here, every element intertwines. The architecture was engineered to produce a specific physical vibration. That vibration, science suggests, could alter human perception, and the ritual art on the walls provided a visual anchor for that journey. This was not a room for giving speeches. It was a tool, a carefully calibrated technology of transcendence. It suggests the people who built it understood, through generations of observation, that sound could be a doorway to something beyond ordinary experience. This leads us to wonder, was this knowledge unique to Malta, or was it a fragment of a much wider, forgotten understanding across the Mediterranean? And over 1,000 years earlier, another culture was carving a different kind of resonance from the heart of a mountain. The caves of India, commissioned by the Mauryan emperor in the 3rd century before the Common Era, present an acoustic philosophy of startling clarity. Here, the goal was not the deep, bone-shaking resonance of Malta, but something almost opposite: sonic purity. Carved from a single, massive block of granite, these are not rough caverns but precision-engineered chambers. The most famous, the Rishi Cave, announces its purpose even at the entrance. Its doorway is a meticulous stone replica of the arched wooden structures used for temporary ritual shelters, a permanent home carved for spiritual practice from the eternal rock. But it is inside where the true acoustic ambition is revealed. The walls and ceilings have been polished, not to a simple smoothness, but to a mirror-like, almost liquid finish. This was achieved with nothing more than abrasives and relentless human effort, a testament to a profound priority. Why devote such immense labor to making stone shine? The answer is in the behavior of sound. A rough, uneven surface scatters sound waves, breaking them apart and creating a muddled, decaying echo. But a surface polished to this extreme acts like an acoustic mirror. When a chant or the rhythmic beat of a drum filled this space, the sound waves would reflect back with almost no distortion. They would not shatter into chaos, but would bounce cleanly, preserving their original tone and blending into a sustained, immersive halo of sound. This creates a remarkably long reverberation time, meaning the sound lingers in the air, layering upon itself before gently fading. For the ascetics and scholars who used these caves, this was the entire point. The architecture was designed to create a perfectly controlled sonic environment. The pure, undistorted reverberation would have enveloped a meditator, supporting the focused recitation of Vedic texts and aiding deep concentration by eliminating acoustic unpredictability. It was a chamber designed not for acoustic shock, but for acoustic serenity, a tool to turn the human voice into a self-sustaining instrument of focus. This reveals a second branch of the ancient sonic arts, one focused on clarity and preservation rather than overwhelming vibration. Yet it shares the same core understanding, that the space around us is not silent, but is a partner in the experience of sound, and by shaping that space, we can shape the mind itself. But the most compelling question remains: why would these frequencies matter? Why target a specific hum like the 110 Hz tone in Malta's Hypogeum? The answer may lie not in the stones, but within us, in the very wiring of the human brain. Modern research has begun to map how sound physically shapes our neural landscape. Pioneering studies, like those led by Dr. Cook at the University of California, Los Angeles, have observed a fascinating phenomenon. When test subjects are exposed to low-frequency sound waves in the range of 90 to 120 Hz, measurable shifts occur in their brain activity. Specifically, activity in the language processing centers of the brain's left temporal lobe can decrease, while areas associated with spatial perception, intuition, and holistic thinking in the right hemisphere become more active. This is a significant transition. It marks a shift from the fast, analytical beta brainwaves of everyday alertness toward the slower, more relaxed, and receptive alpha brainwave state, a borderland of consciousness where internal imagery flourishes and the grip of linear logic loosens. For an ancient practitioner, the discovery of this effect would have been purely empirical, but no less real. Through generations of ritual, they would have observed that chanting at these specific tones inside their engineered chambers did not just create an impressive echo. It produced a repeatable, collective psychological experience. The shared vibration could lower the mental barriers of the individual, fostering a powerful sense of unity and heightened suggestibility. In that resonant darkness, with the very air throbbing at a frequency that gently altered perception, the stories of the gods, the memories of ancestors, and visions of the wood feel vividly, undeniably real. The architecture was achieving what we might now call brainwave entrainment, using the physics of sound and stone to guide the mind into a specific state. In essence, these temples were not just places of worship, they were pre-technological devices for hacking human consciousness. The builders had stumbled upon a profound intersection of geology, acoustics, and neurology, crafting instruments that could tune not only a mountain, but the minds within it. This realization forces us to view these sites in an entirely new light, not as passive backdrops for ritual, but as active, participatory technology. And if this was the purpose, how did the very act of creating the sound become part of the sacred equation? Yet the ancient sound engineers did not stop with stone and shape. They incorporated a fifth, fluid element into their designs, one that would have transformed the very air through which their sacred sounds traveled: water. Many of these subterranean temples are intimately linked with water sources, sacred springs, deep wells, or are simply saturated with a perpetual, cool humidity. While water held profound symbolic meaning across cultures, representing life, purification, and the underworld, its role was also intensely practical, an acoustic modifier of the highest order. To understand why, we need to think of air not as empty space, but as a medium with physical properties. The speed of sound is not constant, it changes based on the temperature and density of the air it moves through. Cool, dense air, like that found in a damp underground chamber, slows sound waves down slightly. More importantly, humidity dramatically alters how sound is absorbed. Dry air, especially when warm, soaks up high-frequency sounds quickly. Those are the sharp, sibilant tones. But in a highly humid environment, the air's capacity to absorb those high frequencies is reduced. This means that in a misty, water-filled cavern, the sound of a chant or a flute would carry with remarkable clarity and brightness, the higher notes ringing out alongside the deep bass, creating a fuller, more complex sonic texture. The builders would have noticed this acoustic shift, how voices carried differently in the wet season versus the dry, and they intentionally placed their most sacred sonic spaces where this natural amplification occurred. Take the At in modern-day Turkey, a site dedicated to the god of the underworld. Here, a sacred pool filled with geothermal waters released carbon dioxide, a gas heavier than air. This created a visible, misty layer at the pool's surface, a place where sound waves would bend and behave in unusual ways. Chants or invocations spoken over this pool would have been acoustically distinct, their tones warped and amplified by the dense, humid, chemically altered air, making the voice of an oracle seem to emerge from the vaporous gateway to the underworld itself. Beyond altering the air, water provided its own rhythmic soundtrack. The steady, unpredictable drip of water from a stalactite or the gentle flow of an underground stream creates a natural, stochastic percussion, a backdrop of complex interference patterns against which human-generated sounds would dance. This was not noise to be silenced, but an integral part of the composition. The integration of hydrology and acoustics reveals a holistic, almost ecological understanding of the ritual environment. Every element, stone, shape, air, and water, was part of a single multisensory instrument. The temple was not an isolated object, but a collaboration with the living earth, using its springs and its damp breath to tune the final, resonant note of a ceremony designed to transport the human mind. But the ancient soundscape extended far deeper than even the lowest chant. Beneath the audible world lies a realm of profound vibration, frequencies so low the human ear cannot register them as sound at all. This is the domain of infrasound, waves below 20 Hz, and it is the sixth principle of these temples, their profound connection to the subterranean silence of the earth itself. These vibrations are not man-made, they are geological. The planet is constantly humming with microseisms, tiny tremors generated by ocean waves crashing on distant shores, by shifting tectonic plates, or by wind interacting with mountain ranges. This creates a constant, low-frequency energy field, a deep, inaudible drone that permeates the bedrock. By carving their most sacred spaces directly into that bedrock, the builders did more than just find a quiet location. They plugged their temples directly into the Earth's own vibrational power grid. The dense stone walls and confined spaces of an underground chamber could act as natural amplifiers for these infrasonic fields, resonating like a giant, silent bell. While we cannot hear these frequencies, our bodies are exquisitely tuned to feel them. We perceive infrasound not as a note, but as a physical pressure in the chest, a vibration in the bones, a subtle sense of unease or profound awe. Research by engineers like Tandy has explored this phenomenon, noting how exposure to specific infrasonic frequencies can trigger visceral emotional responses. It can cause visual disturbances in our peripheral vision, make us feel watched, or instill a deep, wordless sense of reverence. In the context of a dark, torchlit temple, these physiological effects would have been undeniable and inexplicable. The very ground seemed alive, communicating a presence that was felt more than heard. For a visitor, this would transform the experience from one of mere observation to one of direct, somatic encounter. The feelings of awe, the chills down the spine, the overwhelming sense of being in the presence of something vastly greater than oneself, all could be amplified or even induced by the Earth's own hidden song. This suggests the builders may have understood, on an intuitive level, that the most powerful frequencies were the ones you felt in your gut, not the ones you heard with your ears. They were using the architecture to harness and focus the planet's innate energy, creating a subliminal, emotionally charged atmosphere that made the divine feel not like a story, but like a physical reality pressing in from all sides. The temple became a transducer, converting the silent vibrations of the earth into a palpable experience of the sacred. The final, most theatrical application of this ancient science may lie in the labyrinthine heart of the Peruvian Andes. At a temple complex thriving over 3,000 years ago, the builders moved beyond resonant chambers and into the realm of sonic puppetry. Here, the architecture itself became a ventriloquist. The site is a maze of stone corridors, sunken plazas, and most intriguingly, a network of narrow, perfectly carved ducts and ventilation shafts running through the walls and under the floors. For decades, archaeologists assumed these were simply for air flow, a practical necessity for underground rituals. But a team from university, led by archaeologist John Rick, began to question this assumption. Using sophisticated acoustic modeling and on-site testing, they made a startling discovery. These stone tubes were not just airways, they were meticulously engineered waveguides. A waveguide is simply a channel designed to control the direction and propagation of waves, like a fiber optic cable for light, but in this case, for sound. The team focused on the ceremonial conch shell trumpets, known as that were central to rituals. When a priest blew in a specific courtyard, its deep, booming call did not just echo in the open air. The sound was captured and funneled into the entrance of one of these stone ducts. Traveling through the twisting, tubular labyrinth, the sound waves were filtered and distorted. The high frequencies were stripped away, leaving only a low, rumbling, otherworldly groan. This processed sound would then emerge from a duct opening in a completely different part of the temple complex, perhaps in an inner sanctum where only initiates were gathered. The effect would have been terrifying and awe-inspiring. For those hearing it, the voice of the god did not come from a human priest in the distance. It seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, or from the stone statues that lined the corridors. It was a completely disembodied, supernatural presence, manufactured by stone and breath. This was acoustic engineering as sacred theater, a deliberate and sophisticated illusion designed to manifest the divine in an undeniable auditory form. The temple was no longer just an instrument, it was a performer, using hidden channels to throw its voice and make the stones speak. This case study reveals the pinnacle of this ancient art, where understanding of sound moved from creating an atmosphere to orchestrating a specific, miraculous event, proving that the quest to shape perception through vibration was one of humanity's earliest and most profound technological ambitions. The architecture of sound may have reached beyond the earth itself. This brings us to a seventh, more speculative principle, the idea that these resonant chambers were tuned not just to the hum of stone or the rhythm of the human heart, but to the silent music of the cosmos. Some researchers in the field propose a breathtaking connection, that the very dimensions of these spaces were calculated using sacred geometry, mathematical ratios believed to reflect the harmony of the universe. These are the same proportions found in the spacing of planetary orbits, the intervals of a perfect musical chord, and the growth patterns of life itself. The concept, often called the music of the spheres, is an ancient philosophical idea that celestial bodies move in a kind of mathematical harmony, creating a silent symphony. While this connection remains a theory and is debated, it is profoundly compelling to consider that the builders saw a deep unity between the macrocosm, the vast heavens above, and the microcosm, the intimate chamber below. In this view, the temple was more than an instrument, it was a cosmological model. By shaping its walls to resonate at frequencies that mirrored these ideal ratios, they could have believed they were creating a space where earthly ritual sound literally harmonized with the perceived frequencies of the planets and stars. This bridges the science of acoustics with the study of archaeoastronomy, where we find many ancient temples aligned with solstices or star cycles. Perhaps the alignment was not just visual, but vibrational. A chamber designed to resonate at a specific pitch could have been intended to sing in tune with a particular celestial event, like the rising of Venus or the winter solstice sunrise. The act of chanting inside that space, at that moment, would then be an act of participation, a way for the community to join its voice with the perceived song of the cosmos. Whether this was a precise science or a profound metaphor, it points toward a unified vision of reality where sound, stone, and sky were inseparable parts of a single living system. The temple became a focal point where the imagined music of the heavens could be made tangible, felt in the vibration of the air and the resonance in one's bones, completing a sacred circuit between humanity and a harmoniously ordered universe. The true power of this ancient sound technology was not just personal, but profoundly social. An eighth principle emerges from the resonant darkness, one that reveals how these spaces functioned as engines of community. When a group of people chant together or drum in unison within a highly reverberant chamber, something remarkable happens at a biological level. Their individual heartbeats can begin to slow and align. Their breathing patterns subtly synchronize. This is not magic, but a well-documented phenomenon called entrainment, where separate rhythmic systems fall into step with one another. In our daily lives, we see a mild version of this when a crowd spontaneously starts clapping in time at a concert. Now, amplify that effect 1,000-fold within the stone embrace of an underground temple. The architecture itself becomes the conductor. The lingering reverberation smooths out individual vocal differences, blending dozens of separate voices into a single, pulsing harmonic entity. The sound doesn't just hit your ears, it vibrates through the stone floor and into your body, providing a physical, shared rhythm that everyone present can feel in their bones. In that total sensory immersion, the psychological boundary between self and other begins to soften. The shared vibration creates a powerful, nonverbal bond, a collective physiological state that feels like being part of one living organism. For a community facing the uncertainties of the ancient world, This experience was transformative. The ritual, guided by leaders who understood and controlled this sonic environment, would forge an overwhelming sense of unity and shared purpose. Individual doubts or fears could dissolve into the collective hum. The emotional high of that transcendent moment, felt simultaneously by everyone present, would powerfully reinforce the group's identity and its shared beliefs. The temple, therefore, was far more than a place of individual meditation. It was a sophisticated social technology. By leveraging the physics of sound and stone, it could engineer collective emotion, strengthen social cohesion, and solidify the cultural narratives that held the community together. The resonance in the air became a resonance between people, turning sound into the glue of civilization itself. A persistent question lingers like a whisper in these ancient halls: was any of this actually on purpose? Skeptics offer a straightforward explanation that these remarkable acoustic properties are simply happy accidents. After all, if you carve a large, enclosed space from solid rock, some interesting echoes are bound to happen. It is an appealingly simple idea, reducing of work to a fortunate side effect of structural necessity. But the stones themselves tell a different story, one of deliberate, extra effort. Take the caves again, those mirror-polished granite walls. Achieving that flawless, reflective surface required thousands of hours of labor beyond what was needed for stability. Why would a community expend such immense effort on a purely aesthetic finish, if not for a profound, functional reason tied to the behavior of sound within that space? Similarly, in Malta's Hypogeum, the small, carefully carved niche in the oracle chamber is not a structural feature. It is an addition, an architectural detail that acoustic testing shows acts as a perfect resonator for the chamber's key frequency. It is like a luthier adding a precisely shaped sound hole to a guitar. It is a non-structural element whose only purpose is to shape the tone. The network of stone ducts is even more damning to the coincidence theory. Carving those narrow, twisting waveguides through massive walls represented a significant increase in construction complexity. They served no purpose for ventilation that a simpler shaft could not achieve, but they were perfect for transforming and transporting sound in a very specific, theatrical way. This is not the mark of an accident, it is the signature of a design goal. Furthermore, archaeological evidence at many sites shows signs of modification, where walls were subtly reshaped or surfaces reworked long after the initial carving. This suggests a process of tuning, of listening to the space and then adjusting it, honing its acoustic properties over time. This points us toward a more nuanced truth than either pure accident or modern-style engineering. The builders likely did not work from blueprints of sound wave physics. Instead, they operated within a craft tradition, a cumulative, empirical knowledge passed down through generations of master stone workers. They knew from experience that a chamber of a certain shape, carved from a certain stone and finished in a certain way, would produce a desired sonic and experiential effect. They were listening for what felt right, for what worked in a ritual context, and they developed a sophisticated, practical science to achieve it. To dismiss this as coincidence is to underestimate the profound observational powers of our ancestors and the deep, intentional connection they forged between their sacred spaces and the human senses. To uncover these sonic secrets, scientists now listen with tools the ancients could never have dreamed of. The field has moved far beyond simple observation, employing a sophisticated array of technologies to map the invisible architecture of sound within these sacred spaces. One foundational technique is impulse response recording. Imagine the acoustic equivalent of an X-ray. Researchers generate a short, sharp sound that contains a very wide range of frequencies, like a starter pistol's crack or a popped balloon. This sonic burst fills the chamber, exciting every possible resonance. An array of highly sensitive microphones, placed throughout the space, records not just the initial sound, but the complex tapestry of echoes and reverberations that follow. This recording becomes the room's unique acoustic fingerprint, a precise map of how it colors and shapes any sound produced within it. With this data, scientists can then use software to simulate what any sound, from a whispered prayer to a thunderous drum circle, would have sounded like in that exact space thousands of years ago. This is especially crucial for sites too fragile or sacred for modern groups to gather and chant inside, allowing us to conduct virtual acoustic experiments without disturbing the ancient stone. Complementing this, three-dimensional laser scanning builds a perfect digital twin of the temple. Lasers sweep every surface, capturing millions of precise data points to create a hyper-accurate computer model of the chamber's geometry. This model can then be imported into acoustic simulation software, the same kind used to design modern concert halls. Researchers can virtually adjust materials, test how sound would have traveled from a specific speaker's location, or even simulate the acoustic effect of a now-vanished wooden door or a pool of water. It allows them to ask and answer questions that physical testing cannot. What if the walls were covered in tapestries? What if the room was filled with 50 people instead of being empty? This digital archaeology lets us peel back layers of time, isolating the acoustic contribution of the bare stone from later modifications or debris. To probe the deepest vibrations, the domain of infrasound and structural resonance, specialists deploy other instruments. Geophones and low-frequency vibration sensors are placed directly on the stone floors and walls. These devices detect the subtle tremors we cannot feel, mapping the Earth's own hum and identifying the precise resonant frequencies of the monument itself, the notes at which the entire structure wants to sing. Meanwhile, specialized microphones, capable of capturing sounds far below the human hearing threshold, listen for the infrasonic murmur of the environment, quantifying that subliminal pressure that might have contributed to feelings of awe. This high-tech toolbox represents a profound marriage of cutting-edge science and ancient wisdom. We are not imposing modern ideas onto the past, but using our technology as a translator to quantify the intuitive genius of the builders. The data provides an objective voice for the stones, confirming what once could only be felt, that these spaces were meticulously tuned instruments. It transforms anecdote into evidence, allowing us to hear, with scientific clarity, the intentionality carved into the very bedrock, and to appreciate the sophisticated sensory world our ancestors engineered in their quest to touch the numinous. This emerging science of listening to stones has crystallized into a new way of seeing the past, a discipline now known as acoustic archaeology. It represents a fundamental shift in perspective, championed by researchers like Professor Till, who argue that to truly know an ancient culture, we must do more than examine its ruins. We must learn to hear them. This is not a niche curiosity, but an interdisciplinary revolution, weaving together threads from archaeology, ethnomusicology, physics, and neuroscience into a single, richer tapestry of understanding. In this framework, sound is no longer an atmospheric footnote. It is elevated to the status of a primary artifact, as vital to interpreting a site as a piece of pottery, a carved tool, or the foundations of a building. The acoustic properties of a space are treated as deliberate cultural choices, encoded messages about how people gathered and perceived their world. By meticulously reconstructing the sonic environment, acoustic archaeologists can answer questions that silent objects alone cannot. They can infer the structure of a ritual. Did the ceremony involve a solitary oracle whispering from a focal point, or a large congregation chanting in unison to create a collective resonance? The acoustics hint at social hierarchy. Was there a single, amplified spot from which a leader's voice would dominate, or a design that democratized sound, allowing all participants to feel equally immersed? Perhaps most profoundly, this research opens a window into a culture's philosophical worldview. For societies that invested generations in carving resonant chambers, reality itself was likely experienced as fundamentally auditory and vibratory. Their cosmos may have been perceived as a great, humming system of interconnected frequencies, where harmony between human ritual sound and the frequencies of the earth or stars maintained balance and order. This stands in stark contrast to our modern, visually dominated perspective, where we often trust only what we can see. Acoustic archaeology suggests that for our ancestors, truth and power resonated in what could be heard, and more importantly, felt in the very marrow of one's bones. It reminds us that the past was not a silent movie, but a deeply scored sensory experience, and by recovering its lost frequencies, we recover a more complete, more human understanding of the minds that shaped it. This sonic divide between earth and sky is perhaps most powerfully illustrated by comparing two masterpieces of sacred architecture, the underground resonance chamber and the soaring Gothic cathedral. Both are profound acoustic instruments, but they were designed to play entirely different music for the soul. Step inside a great cathedral like Chartres or Dame. Your gaze is pulled upward by towering stone ribs and vast expanses of stained glass. The acoustics here are a product of that immense vertical volume and the hard, reflective surfaces of stone, glass, and marble. Sound has a tremendous distance to travel, bouncing between distant walls and a high vaulted ceiling. This creates an exceptionally long reverberation time, often lasting 6 seconds or more. A single organ note or a chanted phrase does not end crisply. It blooms, lingers, and blends with the notes that follow, creating a dense, shimmering haze of sound. This acoustic environment is perfect for the complex polyphonic music that developed in these spaces, where multiple melodic lines intertwine. The architecture itself blurs the edges of individual notes, crafting an auditory experience of celestial harmony and infinite space, mirroring the aspiration to reach toward the heavens. Now, descend into the silent world of an ancient hypogeum. The architecture does not soar, it embraces. The space is defined by its intimacy with the surrounding earth, which acts as a massive dampener, absorbing external noise and creating a profound, almost absolute silence as its foundational canvas. Within this quiet, reverberation is often shorter but far more focused. The sound does not diffuse into a heavenly cloud, it concentrates into palpable vibrations, particularly in the low frequencies that resonate through the dense stone and into the body. Here, the goal is not to blur, but to amplify feeling. The cathedral uses acoustics to dissolve the individual note into a collective heavenly chorus, lifting the spirit upward. The underground temple uses acoustics to ground sound into a physical sensation, turning vibration into a bridge to the internal and the subterranean. This is not a difference in quality, but in spiritual direction. One architecture seeks connection with the celestial, the transcendent above, using lifted voices and blurred harmonies to inspire awe. The other seeks connection with the chthonic, the earthly and internal below, using embodied vibration to alter consciousness from within. They represent two magnificent answers to the same eternal human question, using stone and sound to map the geography of the sacred, one pointing to the sky, the other listening to the whisper of the earth. Deep within the earth, the final element of this ancient technology was not stone or sound, but the complete and utter absence of light. The 10th principle of these temples is the deliberate, strategic use of total darkness. When every torch is extinguished, the human brain undergoes a profound sensory shift. With no visual input to process, our neural resources are reallocated. Hearing becomes hyperacute, a phenomenon scientists call auditory overshadowing. In that consuming blackness, the rustle of a linen robe from across the chamber is as clear as a shout. The drip of water from the ceiling becomes a rhythmic event. Your own heartbeat seems to echo in the silence. This sensory deprivation was not an inconvenience to be endured. It was the final, masterful calibration of the instrument. By stripping away the world of sight, the architects forced every participant to fully inhabit the world of sound. There was nowhere else for the mind to go. In this state, the acoustic properties of the chamber were not just heard, they were experienced as the entirety of reality. The resonant hum from the oracle chamber in Malta would no longer be a cool acoustic fact. It would become the palpable breath of the chamber itself, a living presence in the void. The disembodied voice of an oracle, amplified by a stone waveguide, would not seem to come from a hidden duct. It would feel like the mountain speaking directly into your mind. The darkness removed all visual context, all points of reference, making the sonic environment the sole anchor. This transformed the ritual from a performance observed into a reality inhabited. The intended psychological effects, the shift in consciousness, the feelings of unity or awe, would all be intensified because there was no competing sensory data. The darkness acted as a psychological amplifier, turning the carefully engineered soundscape into an all-encompassing, inescapable truth. This reveals the ultimate sophistication of the design. It was a holistic sensory experience where architecture, acoustics, and controlled perception worked in concert. They built not just for the ear, but for the mind in the dark, understanding that to truly hear the sacred, you first had to learn to listen with your whole being. But perhaps the most intimate acoustic secret of Malta's Hypogeum is reserved for those who press their body against the stone. Within the deepest chamber, often called the Holy of Holies, the architecture engages not just the ear, but the entire skeleton. This chamber presents a curious feature. Its walls are not merely barriers. They are potential conduits for a phenomenon known as bone conduction. This is the principle by which we hear our own voice, vibrations traveling through the bones of our jaw and skull directly to the inner ear, which is why recordings of our speech sound so strange to us. We are missing that internal, vibrational component. In the resonant environment of the Hypogeum, this natural process could be dramatically amplified by design. Imagine a ritual participant, perhaps an initiate, instructed to lean their back or the side of their head against a specific curved section of the limestone wall. Elsewhere in the complex, a priest strikes a large skin drum with a deep, resonant boom. The sound wave travels through the air, of course, and would reach the listener's ears a moment later. But the initial, powerful vibration also travels through the solid bedrock, pulsing through the interconnected stone like a shockwave through a railway track. Because the listener is in direct physical contact with the wall, that vibrational energy transfers directly into their bones, bypassing the outer ear entirely, and arriving at their inner auditory system a fraction of a second before the airborne sound does. The effect would be profoundly disorienting. The individual would hear the drumbeat internally first, as a deep shudder within their own body, before the external sound washed over them. This creates a jarring sensory disconnect, blurring the boundary between the sound outside and the sensation within. The vibration seems to originate from inside the self. In a state of ritual anticipation, in near-total darkness, such an experience could easily be interpreted not as an acoustic trick, but as a physical possession by the sound itself, or as a direct, internal communication from a spirit or ancestor whose voice was now resonating within one's own frame. This points to a level of sophistication that moves beyond room acoustics into the realm of neurobiology. The builders, through meticulous observation, appear to have understood that hearing is not a singular sense. They discovered how to manipulate the two pathways of sound, airborne and structure-borne, to create a controlled, immersive dissonance in perception. This was not about loudness, but about location, about making the sacred vibration feel as if it were emerging from the very core of the participant's being. In this chamber, the temple did not speak to you. It spoke through you, using the ancient stone as a transmitter and the human body itself as the final resonant instrument. The stones were not just shaped to produce sound, but to tell a story with it. This reveals an 11th principle, where the architecture itself becomes a symbolic language, a physical metaphor whose acoustic function is its active voice. The design of the space often carried a profound symbolic meaning that directly mirrored what the sound within it was meant to do. Consider a chamber carved in a soft, rounded, almost womb-like shape. Its walls curve inward, creating a sense of enclosure and safety. Now imagine that this same chamber resonates powerfully at a low, rhythmic frequency, a pulse that vibrates through the floor. The symbolism is unmistakable. The form suggests a place of origin, of gestation, and the sound within it mimics the primal, life-giving rhythm of a heartbeat. For an initiate spending a night in such a space, the experience was not merely auditory. It was a symbolic enactment of rebirth, a return to a primordial state facilitated by the very vibration in the air. The architecture and the acoustics were telling the same story in two different languages, one of form and one of frequency, to guide the participant toward a specific inner transformation. Conversely, a labyrinthine passage, a twisting corridor that deliberately distorts and muffles sound, carries a very different metaphor. As you walk its confusing path, your own footsteps echo back to you from strange angles. Whispers become garbled and directionless. This sonic disorientation physically embodies the mythological journey through the underworld, a place of confusion, of lost voices, and of confronting echoes of the self. The architecture does not simply house the story, it allows you to walk through it and hear its unsettling effects firsthand. In this context, the echoing voice that finally emerges from a hidden niche is not just a clever acoustic trick. For the listener, immersed in the symbolic labyrinth, that voice becomes the authentic voice of an ancestor or a chthonic deity, a resident of that stone-made underworld speaking from within it. The sound completes the metaphor, making the symbolic journey real. This deep intertwining means we cannot truly separate the acoustic engineering of these sites from their mythological and spiritual narratives. They were never two separate projects. The precise geometry that focused sound to a single point was also the design that marked the seat of divine authority. The stone chosen for its bright, reflective ring was also the stone associated with celestial light. The long, resonant reverberation was not just an acoustic property, it was the perceived lingering presence of the sacred, the breath of the gods hanging in the air long after the chant had ended. The temple was a holistic teaching machine. It used symbolic form to set the expectation, and then used engineered sound to deliver the experiential proof. You didn't just hear a lecture about the afterlife, you felt its disorienting silence and heard its disembodied voices. You didn't just pray for renewal, you felt the resonant pulse of a symbolic rebirth chamber in your bones. The myth gave meaning to the sound, and the sound made the myth undeniable. They were two expressions of a single sacred principle, a unified technology of belief designed to teach, transform, and transcend through direct, unforgettable experience. Yet this ancient sonic technology faces a silent, modern threat. The very properties that make these chambers so extraordinary also make them exquisitely fragile. The 12th principle is one of impermanence, the reality that these meticulously tuned soundscapes are not eternal. They are delicate instruments, and even the most well-intentioned efforts to protect them can irrevocably alter their voice. To allow visitors to experience these sites, we must install lighting, build protective walkways, and control the internal climate. These are essential for preservation and safety, but they come with an acoustic cost. A single metal handrail, a glass viewing panel, or a suspended lighting grid can scatter sound waves, creating reflections that the original, empty chamber never had. More subtly, systems like the humidity control now in place at Malta's Hypogeum, vital for preventing erosion, fundamentally change the air itself. Remember, sound travels differently through dry, conditioned air than through the cool, dense humidity that would have naturally filled the space. The sonic fingerprint is altered, softened, perhaps even muted. Beyond modern intervention, the slow damage of time itself has taken a toll. Centuries of smoke from oil lamps and torches have deposited layers of soot on stone ceilings, a fine coating that absorbs high frequencies. Water infiltration can leave mineral deposits or encourage microbial growth, subtly changing the texture and reflectivity of a wall. The chamber we hear today is not precisely the one the builders tuned. It is an older, often quieter version of itself. This places us in a poignant race against time. The acoustic mapping projects undertaken by researchers are far more than academic exercises. They are urgent acts of digital archaeology, capturing the sonic signature of these spaces in their current state before further change occurs. By creating precise three-dimensional models and impulse response recordings, scientists are building a library of ancient soundscapes. These digital twins allow future generations to virtually step into the chamber as it exists now, to hear its resonance long after tourism, climate change, or the simple passage of centuries may have diminished its physical voice. This work transforms preservation from protecting only the stone to safeguarding the experience the stone was designed to create. It acknowledges that the true artifact is not just the carved space, but the way sound lived within it. We are learning to conserve not only the instrument, but its song. The profound quiet of those ancient chambers is finding a new voice in the modern world. Today, the principles uncovered in these subterranean temples are not just historical curiosities, they are blueprints for a new kind of architecture. A movement often called or regenerative design is consciously reviving this ancient wisdom, creating spaces not just to look at, but to feel within. This is a design philosophy that acknowledges our fundamental vibratory nature, understanding that the spaces we inhabit directly influence our nervous systems, our focus, and our sense of well-being. It asks a simple, powerful question: what if our buildings could actively help us heal? The answers are emerging in the form of meditation pods, integrative wellness centers, and even cutting-edge concert halls. Architects and acoustic consultants now deliberately select materials for their sonic signature, much like the builders of Malta or India. They might specify a specific type of porous limestone for a spa's meditation room, knowing it will gently absorb harsh frequencies and foster a soft, enveloping quiet that encourages deep relaxation. They design walls with intentional curves, not for visual drama alone, but to create smooth, diffuse sound reflections that prevent the jarring echoes of a typical rectangular room. These are not accidental features, they are acoustic prescriptions. In some advanced therapeutic settings, dedicated resonance rooms are being built. These are spaces engineered with precise dimensions and materials to amplify specific, calming frequency ranges. The goal is to use sustained, gentle vibration, much like the resonant hum of an ancient oracle chamber, to help reduce stress, alleviate discomfort, and guide the mind into states of restorative calm. This modern application is fascinating because it represents a full-circle moment. Our ancestors' intuitive, empirical grasp of sound's power over human consciousness is now being validated by the precise instruments of neuroscience and biophysics. We have the data to show how certain soundscapes lower cortisol levels, slow heart rates, and promote alpha brainwave states. This scientific validation is fueling a renaissance in holistic design. It moves us beyond architecture as merely shelter or statement, toward architecture as a partner in health. The new concert hall is not only shaped for acoustic clarity for the audience, but is also designed to reduce physical strain on the musicians performing within it. The new hospital, chapel, or quiet room is engineered not just for visual serenity, but for a sonic environment that actively soothes anxiety. This is the legacy of the ancient sound temples, reimagined for a world in desperate need of quietude. It proves that their greatest discovery was not a specific frequency, but a fundamental truth that by tuning our spaces, we can help tune ourselves. This specialized understanding of stone and sound could not be captured in any book. It represents a 13th principle, the fragile chain of human knowledge itself, and the profound puzzle of how such a sophisticated craft was transmitted across generations. In a world without engineering textbooks or acoustic software, this expertise almost certainly lived as a guarded oral tradition, a secret language spoken between master builders and their apprentices within closed guilds or priestly lineages. The knowledge was not a list of formulas, but a living practice. It was learned by doing, by feeling. An apprentice would spend years watching a master stoneworker tap on a quarry face, listening for the subtle ring that indicated the right material. They would learn to shape a wall not just to plumb line, but by ear, carving, and then listening, adjusting the curve until the chant from the far side of the chamber arrived with perfect clarity. They would memorize which specific tones, produced by which ritual instruments, awaken the deepest response in each unique space. This was tacit knowledge, wisdom stored in the hands, the ears, and the memory of the body. It was passed down through demonstration, through story, and through the shared visceral experience of standing together in the resonant dark. This embodied transmission is precisely why the science feels so elusive to our modern, document-driven minds. We can measure the resonance, but we cannot access the generations of whispered cues, the failed experiments, and the intuitive leaps that led to the final, perfect form. When these cultures eventually faded, often due to environmental shifts or social transformation, that unbroken chain of mentorship snapped. The guilds dispersed, the rituals ceased, and the living knowledge of how to tune a mountain fell silent, buried not under earth, but under the weight of forgotten time. This loss represents one of history's great disconnects, a rupture in the human story where a profound technology of mind and community simply vanished from collective memory. We are left with the magnificent, mute instruments but not the songbook. Our modern quest, using lasers and microphones, is a painstaking act of reconstruction. We are trying to reverse engineer the symphony from the shape of the hall, to hear the echo of a master's instruction in the curve of a wall. Each acoustic measurement is a fragment of a lost conversation, a clue to how our ancestors once listened to the world, and in listening, learned to shape reality itself. These silent stones ultimately ask us to reconsider the very definition of intelligence in the ancient world. For centuries, we have measured the sophistication of past cultures almost exclusively through what they left for our eyes to see. We marvel at the geometric precision of pyramids, the lifelike detail of statues, the narrative power of painted frescoes. These are the artifacts of a visual intelligence, a mode of thought that translates ideas into enduring forms meant to be seen and interpreted from a distance. The acoustic temple, however, speaks to us of a different kind of genius altogether. It represents an intelligence that was not visual, but auditory and vibrational. The primary technology of these builders was not the lever or the pulley, though they certainly used them, but the manipulation of frequency, resonance, and psychoacoustic effect. Their masterpiece was not a static monument to be admired, but an active, immersive experience to be felt within the body and the mind. This suggests a fundamentally different way of engaging with reality. Where we might seek to depict the sacred in paint or stone, they sought to manifest it in the very air you breathed. Theirs was a wisdom of immersion, not observation, of embodiment, not depiction. They understood the world not as a collection of separate objects to be, but as a dynamic web of interconnected energies and vibrations to be harmonized with. The temple was their interface with that vibrating web, a place where human consciousness could be tuned to perceive its deeper rhythms. This realization challenges a deep-seated modern bias, what scholars call our tendency to prioritize sight as the primary and most trustworthy sense. We say seeing is believing, and we design our world for visual clarity. The builders of these spaces operated from a different sensory foundation, where feeling is knowing and truth resonated in the bones. Their achievements compel us to expand our historical imagination, to listen for the intelligence in the echo, and to appreciate a form of ancient wisdom that was holistic, experiential, and profoundly tuned to the unseen pulse of the natural world. Your own bathroom holds a whisper of this ancient science. To feel a fraction of what the builders understood, you need only step into a small, tiled shower or a bathroom with hard, smooth walls. This modern space, with its reflective surfaces and enclosed volume, acts as a crude but effective approximation of those polished stone chambers. Now try a simple experiment. Take a deep breath and sing a single steady note. Hold that tone and then very slowly slide your pitch higher and lower, exploring the range of your voice. As you do this, listen carefully. You will almost certainly encounter a specific pitch where something remarkable happens. The room itself seems to wake up. Your voice doesn't just sound louder, it feels fuller, richer, as if the space is singing along with you. That sudden ring, that point of amplification, is what acousticians call a room mode. It is the natural resonant frequency of that specific enclosed space, the note at which the dimensions and materials of the room vibrate in perfect sympathy with your voice. You have just found the acoustic sweet spot, the same fundamental principle that ancient engineers spent lifetimes mastering. Now take that fleeting moment of resonance in your bathroom and magnify it 100-fold. Envision that effect not created by accident in ceramic tile, but deliberately engineered over centuries into 60 tons of granite. Imagine the resonant frequency not being a brief curiosity, but carefully chosen and calibrated to align with brainwave patterns or ritual instruments. This simple connection bridges. It proves that the phenomena within places like the Hypogeum or the caves are not magic, nor are they vague spiritual claims. They are the profound, repeatable application of universal physical laws. Our ancestors, through patient observation and embodied knowledge, learned to listen to the world's hidden music, and then they learned how to build instruments from mountains to play it. They harnessed the same physics you just demonstrated in your home, transforming it into a technology of experience. That hum in your shower is a direct echo of their genius, a reminder that the boundary between the mundane and the miraculous is often just a matter of scale and intention. But this powerful science of listening to the past carries with it a profound responsibility. The 14th principle guiding this field is not about sound waves or stone, but about respect. For the living descendants of the cultures who built these spaces, sites like, or the sacred mounds of North America are not abandoned laboratories. They are active spiritual anchors, places where ancestors are remembered and cultural identity is rooted. This creates a delicate ethical landscape for researchers. The very act of scientific inquiry, if done without permission or sensitivity, can feel like a violation. Using loud starter pistols to map impulse responses or installing electronic monitoring equipment can be seen as a disruptive intrusion into a place of quiet reverence. The sound of a modern pop, echoing where only chance should ring, can sever a sacred connection. This is why the most meaningful work in now operates on a foundation of collaboration. Leading researchers understand that their first step is not to set up a microphone, but to build a relationship. They work directly with indigenous stakeholders and cultural guardians, not as subjects to be studied, but as essential partners in the process. The questions asked shift from, what can we measure here, to what stories do these stones hold for your people, and how can our tools help honor and preserve that meaning? This collaborative model ensures that the research serves the community's own goals, whether that is protecting the site, reviving a dormant tradition, or educating younger generations. It transforms the work from extraction to partnership. Furthermore, there is a growing awareness about what should be shared with the wider world. Publishing the precise resonant frequency of a sacred chamber, for example, carries risks. That data could lead to well-intentioned but irresponsible attempts at replication, where groups might try to reconstruct the exact sonic experience without understanding its deep cultural and ritual context. It could also fuel a kind of new age commercialization, where a sacred frequency is stripped of its history and sold as a simple sound healing track, reducing a complex cultural technology to a consumable product. The ethical researcher must therefore navigate a narrow path. The goal is to advance our collective understanding and to aid in the preservation of these fragile soundscapes, but never at the cost of exploitation or disrespect. This layer adds necessary complexity to the field. It reminds us that we are not just analyzing inert physics, we are engaging with living heritage. The sound in the stone is entwined with memory, identity, and ongoing belief. To listen truly, we must learn to listen not only with our instruments, but with humility, recognizing that some echoes are meant for specific hearts, and some mysteries are deepened, not solved, by reverence. The silent resonance of these ancient chambers is finding a new voice in the digital realm. A powerful new frontier is opening, one where we are not just measuring sound, but stepping inside it. By combining the precise three-dimensional models and acoustic impulse recordings gathered from sites around the world, researchers are building virtual portals to the past. This is more than a simulation, it is a sensory reconstruction. Using virtual reality technology, a person can now don a headset and find themselves standing in the absolute darkness of Malta's Hypogeum, or gazing up at the Corbeled vault of the treasury of Atreus. But the true magic happens when they speak, or when a digitally recreated ritual drum begins to beat. The software applies the exact acoustic fingerprint of the space to the sound in real time. You do not just hear a generic echo, you hear the specific, calculated reverberation of that chamber, the way it colors and sustains a tone, the way sound gathers at a focal point. This is where artificial intelligence becomes a crucial partner. Advanced AI algorithms are being trained on the acoustic data to model how any sound would have behaved. Researchers can input the sound of a specific type of flute used by the culture, or a chant reconstructed from historical texts, and the AI can predict and generate how that sound would have propagated, blended, and decayed within the virtual stone walls. It allows for virtual experiments that would be impossible in the physical world. What would it have sounded like if the chamber was filled with 50 people chanting in unison? How would the acoustics change if a now-vanished wooden door sealed the entrance? These are questions we can now ask and hear the answers to. The promise of this technology is profound. First, it democratizes access. These are often incredibly fragile sites, with strict limits on visitor numbers to prevent damage from humidity, carbon dioxide, and physical wear. A virtual experience allows students, researchers, and the curious public from anywhere on the globe to have a meaningful sensory encounter with a heritage they might otherwise never witness. Second, it becomes an unparalleled educational tool. Instead of reading a description of standing wave patterns, a learner can stand at the focal point of a tomb and hear a whisper amplified into a clear voice, feeling the concept through experience. It transforms abstract acoustic principles into visceral understanding. Most importantly, it provides a path for preservation through digital legacy. We can safeguard the sonic experience of these spaces, creating a permanent record that persists even as the originals slowly change. This virtual frontier allows us to satisfy our need to connect and explore while honoring our responsibility to protect, ensuring that the awe inspired by these ancient soundscapes can resonate for generations to come, not from a speaker, but from the heart of a carefully reconstructed digital world. Even with our microphones and digital models, the ancient stones withhold their deepest conversations. We can map the resonance of a chamber, but we cannot hear the specific chants that once filled it. Were there dedicated musical scales, melodies passed down through priestly lineages, composed to perfectly harmonize with the resonant frequency of each unique temple? Did the builders have a winter solstice hymn that, when sung at dawn, would make the entire passage hum in sympathetic vibration, turning human breath into a bridge for the returning sun? We may never recover those lost scores, the precise audio blueprints for their sacred technology. This leads to a more practical, yet equally profound mystery. How did they tune these spaces without a single electronic tuner or frequency analyzer? The process was almost certainly one of profound patience and embodied knowledge. A master builder might have used the most reliable instrument available, the human voice and ear. He would have a trusted chanter or a specific ritual instrument, perhaps a drum of known pitch, sound a note in a newly carved space. Then, with apprentices listening, he would carefully chip away at a specific section of wall or ceiling, altering the volume and shape by minute degrees, then listen again. This cycle of sculpt and listen, would continue until the room responded with the desired fullness and sustain. It was tuning by feel and by ear, a craft where the goal was not a number on a screen, but a specific quality of experience in the body and the mind. Another lingering question involves the Earth itself. While we know these sites harness geological infrasound, could some have been deliberately placed to interact with powerful, localized natural sources? A temple built above a hidden aquifer, where the constant flow of underground water created a pervasive, low-frequency hum. Or a chamber positioned near a seismic fault line, where the subtle, tectonic groans of the planet provided a perpetual, subliminal drone that the architecture then amplified. Sites like the vast underground city in Turkey add fascinating new layers. Recent explorations there are not just revealing new rooms, but prompting new acoustic questions. Were its narrow, twisting tunnels designed solely for defense and dwelling, or did their peculiar geometries also create zones of acoustic isolation or surprising amplification, perhaps for clandestine communication or private ritual in the depths? Each discovery like this proves the puzzle is still assembling. And this brings us to the grand, overarching enigma. Did these diverse cultures, from Malta to Peru, India to Ireland, develop something we could call a formalized science of sacred sound? Was there a shared, underlying theory of vibrational harmony that guided their hands, a physics of the spirit transmitted across trade routes, or was each achievement a brilliant, localized artisanal tradition, born from generations of careful observation within a specific landscape, a unique answer to the universal human urge to make the intangible tangible through vibration? The evidence whispers of both. The universal principles of resonance suggest a shared encounter with natural law. Yet the stunning diversity of application, from the bone-shaking focus of Malta to the crystalline clarity of India, speaks to deeply cultural, artistic interpretations. Perhaps the true answer lies in between. They possessed a coherent science, but one measured not in equations but in experience, and recorded not in texts, but in the tuned stone itself. Every new laser scan, every collaborative project with cultural guardians, adds another fragment to this magnificent, incomplete mosaic. The work ensures that the silent stones will never fall completely silent, their whispered secrets an eternal invitation to listen, not just with our tools, but with our humility. From the resonant hum of Malta's Hypogeum to the echoing conch calls in the Andes, the acoustic resonance of ancient underground temples stands as a testament to a deep, forgotten dialogue between humanity and the physics of our world. This was a conversation carved in stone and felt in the bone, a testament to an intelligence that measured success not in height or ornament, but in the quality of an experience. These were not just places of worship, but sophisticated instruments designed to sculpt consciousness, bind communities, and bridge the seen and unseen realms. They represent a pinnacle of pre-technological design, where architecture served as an interface between the human body, the human mind, and the vibrational fabric of reality itself. We have journeyed through the principles of material, form, and frequency, seeing how our ancestors engineered experience itself. They chose stone not only for its strength, but for its song. They shaped ceilings into domes not just for grandeur, but to focus a whisper into a command. They tuned entire chambers to frequencies that could quiet the analytical mind and open the doors of perception. They used total darkness to make us truly hear, and they harnessed the Earth's own infrasonic hum to make us feel a presence greater than ourselves. Each principle reveals a layer of intention, moving us from coincidence to a coherent craft of consciousness. As the pioneering acoustic archaeologist once reflected, the walls have ears, and they remember. The stones hold the echo of that ancient intent, a silent score waiting for us to learn its language. Our modern tools, from impulse response recordings to virtual reality, are finally allowing us to translate that score, to hear the past not as we imagine it, but as it was designed to be felt. This exploration is more than historical curiosity. It is a reminder to listen to the past, to the spaces around us, and to the profound, often unseen ways sound shapes our reality and our connections to one another. If this journey into ancient sound has resonated with you, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to delve deeper into the world's greatest historical mysteries.